Hello guys, welcome to the movie recap review. Happy watching.
In 1971, Father Brennan visits a church under construction. He enters a confessional and speaks to Father Harris, revealing a photo he's acquired of a baby and 3 church members. The back of the photo bears the name Sinai. Shocked by the picture, Harris reluctantly begins answering Brennan's questions about it. Harris explains that the church conducted a sinister ceremony where a devout Catholic woman was hooded, tied to an altar, and forced by the clergy to mate with the devil. The baby in the photo is the result of that union. Harris then flees, with Brennan in pursuit. As they rush outside, a pole falls from the construction site, shattering a stained glass window and fatally striking the back of Father Harris' head. In Rome, Cardinal Lawrence meets a young American novitiate named Margaret upon her arrival in Italy. Lawrence, who helped Margaret, an orphan raised by the church, overcome childhood hallucinations and manic behavior, has been her mentor ever since. He invited her to Rome to complete her training and take her vows to become a nun. As they drive, they encounter protesters. Lawrence explains that while some protests are about employment practices, most are led by young atheists who resent authority, including the church. He hopes that devout believers like Margaret can help bring young people back to the church. Lawrence brings Margaret to an abbey run by Sister Silva. Sister Silva explains that the abbey houses orphans and assists unwed, pregnant mothers in delivering their children. Margaret meets a teenage girl named Carlita, who is shunned due to her bad behavior. The two bond, and Margaret recognizes that Carlita is experiencing similar issues to those she faced as a child. Margaret shares a small apartment with another novitiate named Luz. She is surprised to learn that Luz sneaks out at night, wearing provocative outfits and partying at nightclubs. Luz believes that experiencing life outside the church is crucial, arguing that taking her vows will be more meaningful if she knows what she's giving up. Later, Margaret is horrified to discover that Sister Silva locks Carlita in a stuffy room as punishment for acting out, a mistreatment Margaret herself suffered as a child. Additionally, Margaret is unnerved by a nun who taunts her throughout the abbey. One night, Luz convinces Margaret to dress in provocative clothing and join her at a nearby club. Having grown up in the church, Margaret has never experienced a night out like this before. A man named Paolo buys her a few drinks, and as she becomes inebriated, she loosens up. Margaret joins Paolo on the dance floor and makes out with him before blacking out. She wakes up hungover in her apartment the next day, with no memory of how the night ended. Stumbling into the living room, Luz reassures her that she stopped her from doing anything too naughty and brought her home to sleep off the hangover. Margaret quickly asks forgiveness for her sins by praying, not knowing that Father Brennan is observing her. She went out of the abbey, and there, Margaret is approached by Father Brennan. He hurriedly tells her that he needs her help in tracking down Sinai. Brennan explains that Sinai is living in the abbey and is in grave danger from the church. Although he is barred from the abbey, he trusts Margaret to help him since she is new. Brennan also mentions that Margaret will be able to identify the girl because she will be a witness to great misfortune. Despite Margaret's initial refusal to help, Brennan gives her his address in case she changes her mind. Later that day at the abbey, Margaret observes a woman giving birth. To her horror, she sees a demonic hand emerge from the woman's privates. Shocked by what she believes to be a hallucination, Margaret loses consciousness. The next day, Margaret sees the creepy nun showing a picture of a pregnant woman to Carlita. Feeling that such behavior is inappropriate, she forces the nun to leave Carlita alone. The nun leaves, but soon reappears drenched in gasoline with a noose around her neck on a balcony on the upper floor. The nun proclaims, "It's all for you," before igniting herself and leaping from the balcony. Now, believing Brennan's warnings and suspecting that Carlita is secretly Sinai, Margaret visits Brennan. Brennan shows her the photo of the baby and the 3 church members. He explains that there are 2 factions within the church, those of true faith who wish to follow God's path, and those who seek only to preserve the church's power. As more people have turned away from the church, the latter faction has decided to take extreme measures to regain power. Standing against this sect, Brennan has been excommunicated. He describes to Margaret the rite that Father Harris confided in him and explains that the church performed the rite to produce a child sired by the devil. The photo of Sinai is a picture of this child. The pair agree that Carlita may indeed be Sinai. Brennan then tells Margaret that the church plans to conduct another rite whereby the devil will impregnate his own daughter with the Antichrist, who must be a boy. The church believes that the birth of the Antichrist will result in the apocalypse. which will cause people to return to the church, allowing it to regain its historic level of power. Brennan asks Margaret to find files hidden in the abbey concerning Carlita's birth. If Carlita was born on the 6th day of the 6th month at 6 a.m., it will confirm she is the child of the devil and must be rescued. Brennan also notes that a birthmark in the shape of 666 would be hidden somewhere on Carlita's body if she is the spawn of the devil. Margaret is shaken, but she refuses to believe Brennan's claims. She first seeks help from a priest named Gabriel to find Carlita's records, but he declines. Turning to Carlita, Margaret asks why she acts out. Carlita admits to hearing voices and seeing horrifying visions. Margaret dismisses Carlita, explaining that she herself experienced similar visions as a child, but learned they were mere hallucinations. Carlita challenges Margaret, questioning how she can be so sure they were only hallucinations. Just then, a riot erupts nearby due to protesters. As the students and nuns flee, Margaret experiences a major hallucination where she is assaulted by a demonic figure visible only to her. She screams and writhes in terror, while a disapproving Sister Silva looks on. Later, Silva and the other nuns confront Margaret, claiming that her mental health is declining and that her paranoia is worsening Carlita's situation. They forbid Margaret from interacting with Carlita further and declare her unfit to take her vows. As Margaret drives home, she sees Paolo walking on the sidewalk and stops to talk to him. Paolo is horrified to see Margaret and apologizes, saying he didn't know. Margaret pleads with Paolo to explain why he is afraid to see her. He begins to explain, urging her to check for a birthmark, but is struck by a runaway car and pinned to a wall. Despite Margaret's attempts to rescue him, his torso is torn from his lower half. Margaret is left despondent, and later that night, she dreams of spiders. The next day, Luz is set to take her vows. While everyone is at the ceremony, Margaret sneaks into Silva's office and discovers a hidden passage leading to a room with a filing cabinet. Inside, Margaret finds multiple files labeled Sienna. As she peruses them, she comes across pictures of numerous deformed and deceased children, each bearing a 666 birthmark. Margaret takes all the files and then attempts to find Carlita so they can escape together. However, just after Luz's ceremony ends, the nuns catch Margaret and Carlita trying to escape. A struggle ensues, during which Margaret sees a 666 birthmark on the roof of Carlita's mouth as the girl screams in pain. Margaret manages to hide the files before the nuns apprehend her, but they lock her in a small room. There, she is tormented by visions of the nun who set herself on fire. That night, Father Gabriel breaks Margaret out. He found the files she hid and has secretly been working with Father Brennan. The two rendezvous with Brennan. As they review the files, they discover that Sienna simply refers to the project the church engaged in to have the devil sire a child. Each file details a separate attempt by the church to birth a child with the devil. Most attempts failed, with the offspring dying soon after birth. However, one file is missing a photo, the same photo that Brennan possesses. As they closely examine the picture, they notice that the baby in Brennan's photo bears a 666 birthmark on her scalp. Margaret realizes that the baby in the picture cannot be Carlita, as Carlita's birthmark is on the roof of her mouth. They later find a second file containing Carlita's information, revealing that there are, in fact, 2 living children of the devil. Margaret recalls Paolo's words before his death, realizing he was urging her to check herself for birthmarks. Brennan and Gabriel search her scalp and discover a 666 mark, confirming that Margaret was the baby in Brennan's photo. Suddenly, her full memory of the night she went to the club floods back. After passing out from alcohol, a remorseful Paolo brings Margaret to the abbey. There, she is taken to a hidden chamber, bound to an altar, and offered to the demonic entity. Margaret is forced by the devil while the nuns and other clergy members watch approvingly. Now aware that she is pregnant with the Antichrist, Brennan and Gabriel assist Margaret into a car and start driving her to a clinic. However, before they can reach their destination, the car is T-boned by assailants from the church. Gabriel met his demise, and Brennan is knocked unconscious. Margaret attempts to flee, but finds herself unable to move. To her horror, within minutes, her pregnancy advances to full term, and her water breaks. Members of the church arrive and retrieve her as she loses consciousness. Margaret awakens to find herself strapped to a bed, with Cardinal Lawrence standing beside her. Lawrence tells Margaret that she should feel proud, as her actions will make the church relevant again and save millions of souls. As the nuns and other clergy members look on, a doctor performs a C-section and removes a sac from Margaret's uterus. With eager anticipation, the doctor cuts open the sack to reveal twins, one boy and one girl. Despite the presence of both, the clergy ignore the girl and lavish praise upon the boy, hailing him as the Antichrist. The doctor proceeds to sew Margaret back up. Margaret calls out, requesting to hold her child. Lawrence complies, believing she has finally accepted her fate. However, Margaret seizes the opportunity, using it as a ruse to get close to Lawrence. She stabs him in the throat with the scalpel she had stolen, then grabs the baby boy, threatening to harm him. Silva intervenes, tackling Margaret, and a fierce struggle ensues between the two women. Suddenly, Margaret cries out in agony as Luz, her former friend, unexpectedly stabs her. As the clergy retrieve the baby boy, Margaret collapses to the floor. Silva commands an underling to set the room ablaze, and as they depart, Margaret, clutching her daughter, prepares to face the flames. To her astonishment, Carlita emerges and aids Margaret and the baby girl in escaping the inferno. As they flee, they hear a demonic scream. Looking back, they witness a jackal-shaped beast, the one who impregnated Margaret, howling in agony as the flames consume and destroy it. The members of the church then swap Margaret's baby boy with the Thorne family's baby. Several years later, Margaret, Carlita, and Margaret's daughter reside in a remote cabin. Father Brennan arrives, and Margaret confronts him with a gun. Brennan assures them he means no harm, but warns them that the church has discovered their survival and is plotting to eliminate all three of them. As Brennan takes his leave, he also reveals that Margaret's Antichrist son, now named Damien, is alive and ascending to power.
And that's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Comment down below what movies do you like us to recap next. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.